Great. Thank you for joining. I'm Radhika Iyengar. I am the Melbourne Schools Green Team Chair, and it is an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues, especially Renee, who is the chair for the Melbourne Greens Township, and she has been able to spearhead a lot of interesting initiatives, especially in April, also with our mayor writing the preamble that this month has been declared the Native Plant Appreciation Month, and it is we are just overjoyed by that news, and all the other things are following. So she's conducting all these interesting events at the Melbourne Library for children. We are Last year she invited us to plant some native plants. We just were volunteering in her program, and she did transform this amazing place. We will be cutting the ribbon again at the end of this month. Lots of interesting things happening with lots of initiation from the Melbourne Green Team. And as a part of these series, the Melbourne Schools Green Team decided to organize this particular panel with Anne Price from NJ Audubon. I will give her the floor because she is really the expert who will tell us all about native plants and transforming our yards and especially school gardens to make it more pollinator friendly. And I can only imagine all the butterflies and all the caterpillars that one will be able to see in all our schools if they get transformed the way Anne is envisioning. So Anne, over to you just for a couple of minutes of your introduction. We also want to hear from you on your journey on why you decided to be in NJ Audubon, become an expert for pollinators, and also took this career path just for our students to know that this is an option, and you can also, people can also opt for this amazing journey that you've had and your experience as a teacher, and then maybe off to some more questions and discussions on our topic for today, native plants.
Excellent. Well, my name is Ann Price. I work for New Jersey Audubon, but I've been teaching environmental education since 1987. I've been doing this in a variety of different nature centers, but to get to here, started with having a passion for the outdoors. When I went to college, I went to Rutgers and I studied natural resources management and applied ecology. So that's a whole lot of words to say. I did ology, everything ology. I took them all. So then I worked at Washington Crossing State Park. I enjoyed my time there through my internship when I was at Rutgers, and then went back for a second year. I had intended to work on the non-game endangered species program. I wanted to help reintroduce populations of endangered species back into the wild. But at the time, the program didn't have that much work to do because there were so few things around. I must say that now, along with my career, I'm also a volunteer. I volunteer for the DEP and conserve wildlife, that I monitor bald eagle nests. And there have gone from one nest back when I was in college to now there are over 200 eagle nests in New Jersey. So, the efforts that so many people have put in really does pay off. But my journey was really roundabout. I worked in 4 different nature centers. I worked at a zoo, and I also worked for New Jersey Department of Agriculture. I was teaching people about invasive insects, and then I worked on the spotted lanternfly team. And then when a position opened up with New Jersey Audubon, I had to come back to teaching. That's what I love to do. So I'm happy to be back teaching programs, and yay, schools are starting to request programs again. That's great. That's great. And I'm happy to be doing this with you today because one of my passions is native plant gardening and supporting gardening for wildlife.
Wow, we really have an expert amongst us today. So thanks, Anne, for joining the discussion today. Just a couple of points to start us off on a discussion, then everyone can chime in. And please, if you have anything to share, definitely share. And so my question is for, it seems like, native plants, where do we get it? How do we purchase it? It doesn't seem very easy this year. Renee has made it really easy because she has this campaign going on, and we can pick up things locally at Giro Park on the 22nd. We can share the link on where we can buy buy the native plants. But one thing I want to ask you is that if these plants, of course, are not available at Home Depot. Sometimes you go to Home Depot, the label is not very, we don't understand the labels very correctly. So how do we actually start purchasing them, and what is the best place to go to? And also, if schools want to transform it, how long is this journey? Can the students participate? How should the teachers participate and get involved, which should contain like the least amount of effort, because as we know, schools are inundated with a lot of other things going on after COVID, and lots of other things that we need to take into account. So any suggestions on these two questions?
I would always suggest the Native Plant Society. There is in the Native Plant Society website, which is npsnj.org, Native Plant Society of New Jersey.org. They list plants. They have so many lists. It's great. They will list for you plants that are suitable for your county. So each county in the state has a separate list. They have lists of what does better in the shade, what does better in the sun, what does better with wet soils, what does better with dry soils, what does better near the coast. And then they also have separate lists that will list all of the different native plant nurseries available to you. So sometimes we look at native plants in some of the larger stores. There may be a few, but if you want some things that you know are not cultivars, when you have a native plant that is, let's say you're looking at a purple coneflower, but if you have purple coneflower, it will tell you the Echinacea purpurea. It's not going to say Cheyenne spirit. That's a variety. And because insects have evolved with a strict plant, they've co-evolved, getting a variety might confuse the insects. So it's better to go for the strict if you can.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And so for the schools, if they need to start a native plant garden, what are maybe the five first things that we need to take into account so that we can start a native garden in the schools?
Aha. Can I have almost 10 minutes of time? Because I prepared a PowerPoint that I could share with you that goes with that.
Perfect.
Great. Okay, let me share my screen. I hope I am in presenter mode that I can share my screen. I think I am. Okay, we're good?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, let me reduce this here. Okay, so yes, this is about native plant selections. You don't need to see that. And this is about New Jersey Audubon, because I do work for a really extraordinary environmental agency, and I like people to know about it, because New Jersey Audubon began in 1897, but we really were just about birds for a long time. But we're not anymore. We're a really great organization. We have several different things about education, research, and stewardship. We also try and help in government relations, that we try and help the lawmakers to plan better for the future of the environment. And we also have a lot of members, over 9,000 members of New Jersey Audubon. Now, when I try and encourage people to plant for natives, first you need to know what a native plant is. The native plants are plants that were here before the European settlers arrived, and those plants have insects that evolved with them. So if you see that one really cute picture of the foxglove with the bumblebee crawling in, you see that picture, that plant requires the bumblebees to go inside. They're specialized, and the bumblebees may be adapted to specifically going to that plant. But all of these plants have wonderful, delicious nectars, but nectar isn't the only thing that an insect needs. It also needs pollen. So some insects have developed specific relationships with plants. They need the pollen as well as the nectar. So we really try to encourage people to go full on native plants, because those pollens are specialized too. Now, you might see something as beautiful as a butterfly bush and be like, oh, butterfly bush, isn't that wonderful? It is really pretty. And I look at this picture and I see a beautiful purple flower and I see a beautiful butterfly. But what I'm also seeing is this. When you're looking at that butterfly, what I'm seeing is something that's eating sweets. It's not getting the nutrition it needs. It's not adapted to feeding on the pollen, and butterfly bush doesn't support any caterpillars on that plant. So while they can go sip all that sweet nectar, they're not going to have much more than that. Think of it this way. Think of a plant that serves you food. You might be going off to enjoy a sweet candy bar in the afternoon because you're hungry, but it's not giving you nutrition. It's giving you some calories and it might get you through. But if you want nutrition, you have to have a healthier meal. So let's think of our native plants as this delicious burrito with all those beans and crunchy veggies inside. It provides you what you really need, not just empty calories like the invasive plants might do. So in this particular picture, you can see all of these insects are enjoying nectar from some very beautiful flowers, but they need more than just nectars. This particular insect is a monarch butterfly, and monarch butterflies are amazing. First off, how many butterflies migrate? Monarch butterflies migrate. That's really great. But also they require one specific type of plant. Milkweed is their host plant. That means they lay their eggs on the milkweed leaf. Then that tiny little caterpillar will feed on the milkweed leaves. And then as it grows, it's now consuming that milkweed, which has a toxin inside. And that toxin protects the caterpillars and the butterflies from predators. So certain insects have evolved with certain plants. If you remove all of the milkweeds, we will not have any more monarchs. They need it to survive. Just like this beautiful butterfly. This is a spicebush swallowtail. And that round circle you see there, so cool, that is the egg of a spicebush swallowtail. And it is always found on, wait for it, spicebush. Yeah, you need spicebush in order to have a spicebush swallowtail. And I have to put a shout out to one of my favorite little caterpillars, because look at that caterpillar imitating a snake. There's nothing ferocious about that caterpillar. He just looks like a little green snake in the tree, but the spicebush swallowtail butterfly can fly off and sip nectar from a variety of plants, but it requires spicebush in order to lay its eggs. So some people are like, oh, well, I don't want to have caterpillars everywhere. I want birds. Well, if you want birds, you have to provide the birds with the things that they need as well. And birds consume insects. In fact, chickadees require 6,000 caterpillars to raise one clutch of eggs. That's one little nest of eggs, but they can raise 3 clutches of eggs in a summer. So imagine up to 30,000 caterpillars eaten by those chickadees in one summer. So if you don't have those caterpillars in your yard, you're not going to have the chickadees in your yard. Then some people want to attract other beautiful birds. Well, here's the cedar waxwing. You have to remember, if you're planting certain plants, you're going to have those birds will help. Let's see how we can put this politely. Cedar waxwings eat a berry. It goes through the full digestive process. The bird flies off, sits somewhere, and releases the seed. So it's planting those seeds around, and you have to decide, are you going to give them the seeds of a native plant, like a cedar tree, the cedar waxwings will feed on, or are you going to plant multiflora rose, which will also spread and grow around and outcompete our native plants? So you have to think carefully about what you're choosing to plant. So I've made a list of a few of the most common and most spectacular plants that you could choose for yards in New Jersey. So I'm going to try and go through this quick. I know I can talk forever. So first we have a flowering dogwood. It's a beautiful plant and it can support 37 different types of birds. American holly can support 13 different types of birds. You see, I'm listing all the different types of birds that will eat the berries from these plants. But these plants, being native, are also supporting the insects that need it as well. So think about the butterflies going to a black cherry tree. You have over 400 species of butterflies and moths that consider black cherry their host tree. But oaks are the super species here. When we're talking about trees, oaks are remarkable. There are so many species of birds that eat the acorns, mammals that eat the acorns, and even insects that eat the acorns. Plus, we also have over, are you seeing that number on there? 530 species of caterpillars that consider trees, the oak trees, their host plant. And there are over 20 species of oaks that are native to New Jersey. So there's a variety out there. A lot of people don't like them because they get so big. Well, they don't all get tremendously big. You have to look for the ones that you want. And you also have to remember that there are certain things about them that are extraordinary. Those leaves are good for the animals. They also have those acorns that are going to provide so much food for such a great variety of wildlife. Then there's shrubs. If you'd like smaller things in the properties and the gardens that you're planting, think about some of the native shrubs. There's some that are fun for people, like going for the elderberry. The plant has edible berries. High bush blueberry is also a native that's wonderful. Buttonbush is great, especially if you have a wet area, because that plant will thrive in wet soils. Fair note though, buttonbush is really attractive to deer. So if you're looking for something that's deer resistant, let's look at something else, because the deer will eat that up. That's delicious candy to them. So you can start thinking about the viburnums. Now, they're deer resistant. Viburnums are spectacular. They've got it all. It's like that triple bonus. They go for beautiful plants. They've got flowers in the spring. They've got gorgeous berries in the autumn. And then they even have a really nice foliage. The birds like it. The caterpillars like it. They're great. The only thing that doesn't really like it are deer and rabbits. But deer and rabbits, when they're hungry, will eat anything. These plants have evolved to grow back from deer browse, and that's pretty great. So even though they might get nibbled on, they'll still keep coming back. So the perennials, this is like looking at the candy counter. This is the fun part. This is what visually we want to see because they're so striking, but also the pollinators love these plants. These are things you want to have in a pollinator garden. But remember to stagger the heights. Go for some things that are big. Everyone likes those little low things. Like they might want to have the blazing star liatris, which is really great and beautiful and easy to grow, or the cardinal flower, which can bring in hummingbirds. I have a fondness for hummingbirds too. Bee balm or bergamot, those are great for hummingbirds and pollinators. They all think of it as the candy shop. But then some taller plants too, like the asters and the joe pye weed. Joe pye weed can grow 7 feet tall. It's a perennial, it's beautiful, and so many species are really attracted to it. It's a great addition to any garden. I love joe pye weed. So here's a bonus plant for our perennials, the milkweeds. Milkweeds are tougher to find because the nurseries are just starting to realize more and more people are planting milkweeds because they want to support not only the butterflies that rely on it for their host plant, like the monarchs will, but there's also some beetles that really use the the milkweeds. And then there's lots of things that like this very sweet and scented flowers in all of those milkweeds as well. One thing about the milkweeds, they're tough to find. So what I'm telling people is, yes, you go on that list on the Native Plant Society and you might be able to find them a little bit better, but I highly recommend you tell your local nursery that you want them because they're going to recognize that they're not growing what people want. So you have to tell them you want these plants, and then maybe in the future, the local nurseries will start growing it too. So goldenrod. Now, goldenrod gets a really bad reputation as being that allergy plant. No, goldenrod is a pollinator plant. The insects pollinate it. The thing that people are allergic to when goldenrod is blooming is ragweed. Ragweed is so brutal. It does make so many of us, myself included, my eyes swell up. I start sneezing all the time. It's really hard to be around ragweed. But I do love goldenrod. It is beautiful. It makes a great addition to any garden. It grows very easy. The bees love it. The butterflies love it. There's so many species of it. And again, deer and rabbits don't really like it. So that's a good one to have around. When you're planting in your garden, a good rule of thumb is to go for the 70% rule, because a lot of people would love to have 100% native plants, but that's tough because then you have to think about staggering blooms throughout the season. You want things that are going to bloom all year round. Well, that's hard to do. You have to really plan it out to make it work. But if you want to stick in some, lovely little marigolds down in your garden too, go ahead. Just make sure you're providing enough nutrition and host plants, because if you want to have those pollinators, you have to have their host plants where they can lay their eggs too. So I'm just going to put one more shout out that New Jersey Audubon does do a native plant sale. We have the Nature Center of Cape May. That one will be having their plant sale on May 7th. So if you're interested, check out our native plant sales going on. And then just a thank you to so many of my friends who let me use their pictures in my slideshow, because they have better luck than me. So I always have to make sure I thank my friends. Okay, I think I've stopped sharing. Are we back to everybody seeing each other? Okay, good. Sorry if I took too long for that. I can talk a lot and I can keep on going, but I tried to make it short and sweet.
This was really helpful. Five things. I'll remember those. We have to post the videos. I think then we can all go and buy from Renee's link, because we have a delivery system here in Melbourne. So that will be great. And before I open it up for more questions, if a person, or if teachers are, or if parents are interested in getting more qualified on native plants, does NG Audubon have any formal training sessions or webinars or other things that we can make
We
available?
do have some things. Right now we're toward the tail end of our webinar that started in the early spring. But if you go on our calendar, you can see njaudubon.org. That's njaudubon.org. We do have a lot of different programs going on all over the state, because we do have 4 nature centers and we have so many different places of outreach. So you can check out what programs we have going on. But we also have, we are the affiliate for the National Wildlife Federation. And in New Jersey, we do Garden for Wildlife programs as well as certifications. So we can help people that want to certify their yard, go on our website and look under gardening. And there are links there to look at the list of what do I need to provide to be a certified wildlife habitat. It'll talk about, planting native plants, food sources for animals, providing cover and providing water, providing places for animals to nest. If you do all those things, you can certify any yard. You can certify a school or a place of worship or a community property. There's so many different things. And then some towns are going all out and getting their towns certified. There are 6 towns, I believe, in New Jersey that are already certified, and there are 12 towns that are registered and on their way. So it's a lot of fun.
Great. Fantastic. Does anyone have any questions for Anne? Yes, Katya?
Do you have recommendations for lawn is the loose term I will use, but for ground cover, large swaths of what people like as green? I know that you can plant them all with larger plants, which I love. But if people feel like there needs to still be a big square of green, are there things that are native that don't require fertilizer and don't require all of the water that then gums up the system with the fertilizer and uses up ridiculous amounts of water and
I
pollution
love the
from
way
mowing?
I love the way you word that question. That's awesome. It's
I would say,
rather difficult.
did you notice my bias?
I have a similar bias. Yeah, I am that person who doesn't like lawns. So it is a good question. I personally don't know too many plants that can go flat on the ground that stay low like lawns, but my lawn does not get treated with any sort of pesticide, whether it's insecticide or herbicide.
Right.
So I do have things that are not native, but naturalized.
Right.
I have
And I did that. I
clovers,
mean,
right? Yeah.
I mean, I have never fertilized my lawn in 25 years, and my neighbors could tell you that it looks like that because I have clover and I have onion grass and I have, random green things growing there. But I didn't know if there was, so clover is something we can use?
Right. Well, those things are actually naturalized. They're not
Okay.
native plants. So I can't recommend it, but I have that in my yard too. I allow it to grow wild. I don't allow it to become unsightly. I keep my lawn mowed and I go out there with my little push mower and I go out there with my little hand edger. I won't waste fuels trying to do the little strip that I have that's grassy. But I have clovers and dandelions and sorrels and wild onion. And I go and I am also that weirdo that eats my lawn. I do. I'll make a little salad. I'll have some lettuce and then I'll pick some dandelions and some violets and some sorrels, and that fills up my bowl, and it's quite beautiful and colorful and delicious and good for me too.
Could I just add, and you just mentioned the violets. The violets are a nice ground cover, and those are native. The Violetta sororia is our state flower, and it's actually mowable. As there's a phlox subulata. And the reason I'm so familiar with those Latin names right now is because we're planting those in the perimeter of our little community garden that some of you have worked on, because it is mowable in, if need be. It stays low to the ground, and it does have lovely, lovely flowers to support our pollinators. Those are just two. You could look at jerseyards.org as well, Katya,
And
because they have
like
a couple of other
sedges?
ground covers.
I've been told sedges you can mow also.
Yes,
and they're
sedges
native
too, but sedges require wet soils.
Oh.
So if you have a softer area, maybe you have an area that rains a lot, that might get a lot of sedges occurring even naturally coming into the area.
Okay.
Thank you, Renee. I did not know that about the phlox. I just wrote it down on my notepad while you were talking. Thanks.
And Renee, where is that? Because I'll go. That you have.
Where is our garden?
Yes.
I'm not going to take up much time here, but today it's the
that
paths
triangle?
it's the triangle at
Okay.
Whittingham and Mountain View.
Okay.
Please go take a look. And if you are ever in our township, we've got a great little community pollinator garden going. Radhika can tell you later.
And one question from my side, and it may be very naive, because many people say that, milkweed is very poisonous. Is it going to be poisonous for my dogs to be around? It's not good for children to be around. So I'm not sure whether this should be a concern or not.
That's a very good question. Milkweed is toxic. If they're eating it, it would be a problem. My guess is most children wouldn't, because it is extremely bitter. So if they tasted it, they would immediately gag it out. I don't know if a dog would ever do that. My dog does not. My dog eats pretty much everything else in my yard, and she's never eaten a milkweed. So I can't imagine that would be a thing a dog would do because of that bitterness that's in there. There are certain plants that have toxins in it, and usually those toxins are recognizable by the taste. That bitterness will turn you off. I can testify that during gardening, I've had times where I've had it on my hands and accidentally got it in my mouth, and it's bitter and nasty, and I'm still okay.
I have a question for Anne, and I'm not sure if you were headed in this direction, but because I'm in an area that's prone to flooding, and I have a backyard that ponds, I have a little pond out there today after yesterday's rain. I'm curious about what you would encourage, because I would really like to get water absorbent, deer resistant, because I have a herd of 9 who visit every day. So it has to be a combination of both. And I've been doing a little research. I'm not a gardener, I admit it, but anything that you can contribute would be welcome.
Well, some of the plants that will do better in wet areas, like the red maples will do well. River birch will do well. You can have, what are some other really good wet soil ones? Some of the willows will do really nicely in the wet soils too. Again, going on to the New Jersey, the Native Plant Society of New Jersey, they do have lists of plants that will do well in wet soils, and they can recommend it. Buttonbush is extraordinary and will do very well in wet soils, but I do believe the deer love it. So you would have to get like cages for it while it's establishing itself. Oh, that's one of the other things I didn't mention about that's a benefit for gardening with native plants. Those plants have evolved in this area, so they will thrive. Once their roots have established themselves, they will grow. You don't need to go out there with your hose and constantly water them. You don't need to fertilize them. They will do well in the conditions that are expected here in New Jersey.
Sarah, there's also a great website which I found, which is about using natives in a small yard. If you just Google that, and they have 4 or 5 different diagrams, which they show you a rendering, and then they show you the planting, and then they list out the plants that they've used. And one of them is around a pond, and one of them is for a downspout. And so I would bet that both of those would be good options for a wet yard.
What is it called again?
I will Google it right now while we're talking, and I'll put the link in our in the chat.
Thank you.
This is Ipshita. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, Pshita, please go ahead.
I actually planted 2 butterfly bushes thinking that they will attract a lot of butterflies. So sad to hear today that it doesn't supply any nutrition at all, it seems. I put them in pots. Will it still spread if I put it in a pot? Because I learned later after planting them that they can spread. So I put it back into a pot.
It could, because the seeds can be spread as well. Also, when the plant, this is one of those plants that as the branches reach down and touch the ground, it can form roots and shoot off from there as well. And it's very difficult because butterfly bush is beautiful. I am one of the people who had a butterfly bush in my yard, and I'm working on getting rid of it, but it keeps coming back. So it's time and energy to get rid of it. But it's worth the effort. See, the problem is when you have something that has so much sugar in it, the insects are attracted to that sweetness. They want the sugars, so they're going to it instead of going to the plants that are providing them with the appropriate nutrition.
See, so planting milkweed or something around it will not help. It does help, but they will frequently choose the nectar from the butterfly bush first. So it helps, but I try and get rid of the butterfly bush if I can. Oh no. Okay, thank you.
A devious name, butterfly bush. Obviously, you will want to buy the bush because of the butterflies, but it's really not what we intend to be good for the butterflies and caterpillars.
There are some states that have made regulations against selling of certain types of plants. I believe butterfly bush might be one that's on those lists. I know Japanese barberry is another one that so many people planted because it will stop things from coming in your yard. It's covered in thorns. And as a person that had to do field work, bushwhacking through the woods, I really hate barberry. It's painful. It's thorny, painful, difficult to get through, and it attracts ticks. We don't want that in your yards. So yeah, I wish more people would know about the correct things to plant before they purchase them. I'm not sure if you know much about spotted lanternflies, but the plant that the spotted lanternfly is attracted to is the Ailanthus altissima, or the tree of heaven. They are specifically attracted to it for their mating season. So as they become adults, they go to this tree, they'll feed on that tree, which has a toxin in the sap, similar to the milkweed and the monarch. Then after they've mated, the females will fly off and lay their eggs anywhere. They'll lay their eggs on another tree, or on your lawn furniture, or on your car. Then in the spring, they hatch out and they begin to feed on everything that's around them, not just the ailanthus tree. Now, had people not intentionally planted ailanthus here 80 years ago, we wouldn't be having the problem of the sustained insect that's around. But they're here. So we're working on learning that, if we have the native plants, then we will be supporting the native wildlife. If you have the invasive plants, you could support a potential invasive insect that could come here unintentionally later.
And could I ask you to just talk about, because for the recording for later, there may be people who are just starting out, and talk about perhaps, I'm getting plugs, or I'm planting some small plants. How long can I expect it to take for my native plant yard to flourish, and how, really look like what I see is so gorgeous in photographs, just so people don't get disappointed, they should understand.
Well, the nice thing is many of the native plants that you would plant will spread. They won't all spread quickly, but they will spread. So if you put in milkweed, once it establishes itself, which takes a year, 2 years, it'll start to spread out, and it'll start to let the roots grow and spread, as well as it'll provide seed and blow off and grow a little further too. Some of the plants are a little rougher to get started, but if you start with some of the more vibrant things, like you go for the liatris, the blazing star liatris, that one will grow very quickly and spread very nicely. And it's beautiful stalks of purple. It's so pretty. Bee balm and monarda, that is such a pretty flower that grows pretty quickly and spreads. It's in the mint family. If you want to know if a plant is in the mint family, hold its stem and it has edges. It makes a square. Now I'm holding a pencil because we all know it has that shape that makes a pencil. But the square stems of that plant will tell you it's in the mint family, and most deer don't like the mints, and they do tend to grow rather quickly and easily. So that's a nice one that will take off and spread as well. In the first year or two, you might want to consider watering them and tending to them and pulling out any weeds nearby. But if you pack them in a little closer when you plant them, say in a group of maybe a 3-foot radius circle is enough for a nice garden. If you start with that and you plant enough, it'll help resist the invasive weeds that could grow there. And I hate using the term weeds. Weeds are just things that grow where they're not wanted, right? So, if I had a garden of dandelions and a rose growing in the middle, the rose is the weed. So it's really a matter of having what you want growing in a certain spot. So if you pack it in a little tighter and put a good mulch layer down, it should stop it enough that the other plants, they'll start spreading from their roots.
And I think what I also learned from, Renee's work at the triangle is the spacing is important, because the mistake that I made, Anne, is that because their Mark was there doing the spacing, and we planted it exactly where he had put a mark. But in my pollinator garden, I put the liatris first, and then in front there were all these milkweeds. Of course, I love butterflies and monarch
But they're
butterflies. So
tall.
I was happy with the milkweeds taking over my liatris, but they couldn't thrive very well because I knew they died earlier on, or maybe that was the first year I was planting, so maybe I didn't plant them properly. So I don't think they got enough sunlight. So I don't know if there are any tips on how we should space them or have the taller ones back, or I don't know. I
Well,
didn't do a good job of
that
it.
is a goal. Put the taller plants toward the back of your garden if there is a front and back, or if there's not, put the taller ones toward the center so that they don't block the others. But you have a lot of things that you need to consider when you're planting. You need to consider if it needs to be in the sun or if it does better in the shade, because some plants will tolerate shade better. Also consider when you're planting to think about think about trees too. So many people want to put in their beautiful flowers because they'll give you a show the first year. But if you check out sources through DEP, you can get yourself some little oak saplings to put in. They're just a finger high right now, and you can put them in. And in 5 years, you have yourself a small oak tree. And very soon it will start producing its acorns, and you can attract all sorts of wildlife. And that's a lot of fun. But when you're planting those trees, if you're planting trees or shrubs, or remember I said the Joe Pye weed, think about what those plants look like at their mature height when you plant them. Because if you plant a little sapling and it's only this high, you're thinking, gee, it's only going to take up this much space. That's great. But, an oak tree, when it's done growing, can be 30 feet in the air. You want to have the space, and how wide is it going to be? And you need to remember that you can let your garden change too. If you put it somewhere and you're like, gee, it's not thriving there, dig it up, move it, give it a try somewhere else. It's okay to switch things out a bit. It's hard because it's a lot of work. I'm not 20 anymore. I know it's hard work. I do, but it's such a fun way to work hard, in my opinion. I love gardening. I don't even wear gloves because I like getting my hands dirty. I like the feel, and I like the excitement of, oh, look, a little bug. What do we have here below? And it's a lot of fun to experiment and see what's coming.
It's funny you say that because I'm not a gardener. I don't love gardening, but I love monarch butterflies because of Renee. So I keep planting milkweed, and I'm very happy seeing the butterflies. But I guess it depends on people's interest, especially with the school kids. I think that they need to be exposed to having a much more biodiversity in their schools, and having a sense that learning is not just in this classrooms but also outside. And we have fantastic teachers in Melbourne who do a great job, especially in Wyoming and in Glenwood. They've taken on this butterfly garden, and now I get to see all the summer related activities. Our children are going there, so I think it's high time that we turn our schools into biodiversity havens, as I call it, so that we can learn from our nature and habitat, and also contribute to at least the monarch population here. So thank you, and I think we are just about a little bit over time. Any last questions, comments from anyone?
I just have a comment. And I've seen a lot of webinars and I always learn, but your webinar was absolutely fabulous. And, I've been doing this for a little while and I thought you added so much information. So for beginners, this is a real prize. And I look forward to being able to share this in its recorded fashion. So thank you. Thank you. This was wonderful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's easy to teach about something when you have a real passion for it.
Your passion is clearly visible, and you have given us some of that passion also through the exercise, through the activity that we did right now. And I think, as Renee is saying, we definitely will share this discussion, and hope that maybe next day you come back and we'll have other questions for you after a year of experimenting with the pollinators in our yards and in our schools.
Excellent. Well, I'd be happy to come.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
Thank you. Very informative.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did we get to all the questions in the chat? I want to make sure we get